A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't want to consume red meat for various reasons. Among the reasons are ethical reasons. For example, vegans, vegetarians, people who love animals for obvious reasons feel it's hypocritical to consume animals. That's an example of an ethical reason not to eat meat, and it's a true reason. I mean, if you really love animals and you want to have, if you have feelings for animals, you don't want to eat red meat or any kind of meat, actually. So that's a legitimate reason. Some people have environmental concerns. For example, they're destroying rainforests to make room for cattle and all this and that. That's another legitimate reason. But however, a lot of the vegetarians and vegan advocates, they talk about eliminating red meat from the diet because of health concerns. You've probably seen the videos. A lot of these, I call them militant vegan advocates, because the reason I use the word militant is because they kind of slip into hyperbole when they're discussing the dangers of eating red meat. In other words, what they do, they tend to cherry pick studies to prove their point, while leaving out other studies that might oppose the point. So they're not giving you a complete picture of what really is going on in regard to the effects of red meat on health. So let's talk about red meat today. I mean, should you eat it, and are there any benefits to actually consuming red meat? Red meat, of course, comes from mammals, and it's red when it's raw. Examples of red meat include beef, pork, lamb, venison, and boar. Those are all examples of red meat. White meat are stuff like chicken, turkey, and other meat from fowl and birds. Generally speaking, white meat contains less fat than red meat. However, there are certain cuts of red meat where if you have most of the fat removed, they can be almost as lean as chicken. For example, ground sirloin, ground round. If you go to a butcher and have most of the fat removed, what's left is mostly muscle meat, and it contains much less fat than people believe. I know this because I did this years ago when I competed in bodybuilding contests. I used to have my meat, I used to go to a butcher and have them cut all the fat off. So it was like just pure protein. But I'll get to more on that later. A lot of the benefits of meat depend on how the meat is raised. Conventional meat comes from animals that are usually raised in concentrated animal feeding operations. They call them factory farms. These confine animals, and they provide them with grain-based feeds. Actually, years ago, I was asked to do an article on something called grass-fed beef, which had the reputation of being healthier than conventional beef. I didn't know much about grass-fed beef. When I did the research, I came upon these so-called factory farms, and it was absolutely abhorrent to me. It was disgusting. It turned my stomach. It was horrible. To the way they treated animals like cattle and cows and pigs and chickens was just absolutely devastating. It was so bad that I was eating meat at the time I did the research for the article. I couldn't eat meat for about 7 months after writing that article, because I would just think of those cows, in my mind. And I walk by the meat counter in supermarkets, and I literally get sick to my stomach thinking about it. I couldn't touch meat. Anyone who looks into that, who has any type of soul or heart, would probably feel the same way. But anyway, the other type of meat, as I mentioned, is grass-fed meat, and this comes from cows that are allowed to graze on grass. They're not stuck in little pens and all that stuff, and they forage for their feed, and they're not raised on. There's no factory farms involved. As a consequence, the nutritional profile of grass-fed beef is different than the type of beef, let's say conventional beef, that you find in supermarkets. For example, grass-fed beef is higher in omega-3 fatty acids. It has a different type of fat profile. It has much higher levels of something called CLA, which is conjugated linoleic acid, which is a type of fat which is considered healthy. Some studies show it has preventive effects against diabetes and cancer. You don't find that in conventional meat, but it's in grass-fed beef. So generally speaking, grass-fed beef really is healthier than conventional beef. Then you have the organic meat, which means the meat must come from animals that are given 100% organic feed and forage, and they're raised in a way that accommodates grazing and other natural behaviors. And they also, most importantly, organic meat involves the animals do not receive antibiotics or hormones. And then you have the final category of processed meat. These are from conventionally raised animals, and they go through various processing methods, such as curing or smoking. Examples include sausages, hot dogs, and bacon. We used to call hot dogs mystery meat because you never knew what kind of meat went in hot dogs. There was rumors of noses and hooves and all kinds of crap in hot dogs, which is not too far away from the truth. But anyway, the truth is that of all the types of meat, and I'll get to this more in depth in a second, the type of meat that is most, let's say, hazardous to health is definitely processed meat. And this is where a lot of the confusion arises, because a lot of these studies that come out that blanketly make statements that meat causes cancer and heart disease, these studies don't differentiate between fresh red meat and processed meat. And there's a big difference, because processed meat contains chemicals which can actually promote cancer and other diseases. It's not found in the red meat. I'll get into that more in a second. What's the nutritional value of meat? Why would you eat meat at all? Well, for one thing, meat, and most bodybuilders know this isn't big news, meat is a good source of natural creatine. As a matter of fact, if you eat beef several times a week, let's say more than 3 or 4 times a week, and you take a creatine supplement, you're not going to get the best results from the creatine supplement, because eating meat consistently actually builds up creatine in the muscle. It accumulates in the muscle. So basically, your muscle already has a pretty good amount of creatine. So if you eat or take a creatine supplement, you'll get some benefit, but you're not going to get as much benefit as, for example, a vegan who doesn't eat meat at all, doesn't have a lot of, creatine is only found in animal protein sources. So the only creatine a vegan gets is the 1 gram a day made in the body naturally from methionine, arginine, and what's the other one? Glycine. Those are the 3 amino acids from which creatine is synthesized in the body. So you make 1 gram of creatine in the body naturally, and that's the only source of creatine for a vegan, unless he takes a creatine supplement, which, by the way, is permissible because creatine supplements are synthetic. They're not derived from animals. They are suitable for any vegan diet. Anyway, what's another huge nutritional benefit of, especially for women, from red meat is the iron it contains. It contains a more absorbable form of iron called heme iron. Heme iron is more absorbable than the type of iron found in fruits and vegetables, which is called non-heme iron. So, and women tend to, actually, a lot of women are anemic from lack of iron because they depend on fruits and vegetables, and a lot of that non-heme iron that's found naturally in fruits and vegetables more or less passes right through them. However, if you take vitamin C with non-heme iron, it can convert the non-heme iron into heme iron. It's a simple solution. A lot of women don't do that. But women who consume red meat very rarely have iron deficiency anemia. Of course, meat is a very good source of protein. A 4-ounce serving of meat has about 19 grams of protein. If it's 80% lean beef, it has about 23 grams of fat, 0 carbohydrates, and it's a great source of vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is another nutrient only found in animal protein foods. This is probably the greatest risk for vegan diets, because unless a vegan takes a vitamin B12 supplement, they almost are guaranteed to be deficient in B12. It takes 5 years for a B12 deficiency to show up because your liver stores B12. But once it shows up, well, once you are into a B12 deficiency, it's very serious. It causes shrinkage of the brain. It causes degeneration of the spinal cord, all this and that. So beef, a 4-ounce serving of beef contains 101% of the daily requirement for vitamin B12. It contains 43% of the daily requirement of zinc. Zinc is another mineral, very important for testosterone, growth hormone, immune response, also found almost entirely in animal-based foods. Meat contains 31% of the daily value for selenium, which is a trace mineral that helps prevent certain forms of cardiovascular disease and cancer. And it contains 30% of the daily nutritional value of niacin. So the protein in beef is also complete in the sense that it contains all essential amino acids. It's not quite as good as milk and egg protein, but it's probably the third best protein you can eat behind milk and eggs, or eggs and milk in that order: eggs, milk, and meat. As I said, grass-fed beef is lower in total and saturated fat and higher in omega-3 fatty acids compared to grain-fed beef. What are the health effects of eating meat? Well, like I said, there's been a lot of confusion, and unfortunately a lot of these vegan militant advocates, they cherry pick the studies and they tend to talk about how all meat is bad for you. But the truth is, when you look closely at the studies, that's not what you really find. Most of the studies are what they call observational. In other words, they're not based on cause and effect. They're based on watching people, how they ate for a certain amount of time. But the problem with observational studies is that there are what they call confounding variables. In other words, for example, people who eat a lot of meat could be engaged in other behaviors that are adverse to health and are the actual cause of their health problems. For example, they might be more likely to smoke, drink excessive alcohol, not exercise, and so on and so forth. So any negative health effect that is attributed to red meat consumption might actually be from these confounding variables. So one of the things that meat is often accused of is causing cardiovascular disease. And a couple of observational studies, as I said, there are problems with observational studies, shows that red meat is associated with a greater risk of death, especially from heart disease. But not all red meat has the same effect. A large study that included 134,297 individuals found that a high intake of processed meat, not fresh red meat, was significantly associated with an increased risk of death and heart disease. But no association was found for unprocessed meat, even in amounts of 250 grams or more per week. Randomized controlled trials, which are considered to be higher quality than observational studies, appear to support those results. One review of controlled studies concluded that eating half a serving, or 1.25 ounces, which is or more, of unprocessed red meat doesn't adversely affect heart risk disease factors such as blood lipids or blood pressure. Honestly, I don't know about you. I have never seen anybody who eats who consumes 1.25 ounces. That's about smaller than a meatball. But anyway, that's the silliness of some of these studies. One of the reasons processed meat may be associated with heart disease is the high salt content. Processed meat is very high in sodium. Excessive sodium intake has been linked to high blood pressure, especially in people that are sensitive, what they call sodium sensitive people. And others, sodium doesn't make that much of a difference. So what about cancer? That's another thing. The militant vegans always talk about how red meat will cause cancer. Observational studies show that red meat consumption is associated with an increased risk of certain types of cancer, especially colorectal and breast cancer. But again, it depends on the type of meat. Consumption of processed red meats like bacon and sausage has been linked to an increased risk of colorectal cancer. This doesn't seem to be true for unprocessed red meat, fresh red meat. A review of studies found that high processed meat intake was associated with a larger increase in breast cancer risk compared to high unprocessed meat intake. So they're not really sure of why. It's possibly, some people think it's because nitrates are used as a preservative in processed meats. It helps to maintain the reddish color. Nitrates, when they combine with certain amino acid byproducts called amines in the stomach, form a chemical called nitrosamines, which is known to be a carcinogen. It's linked to stomach cancer, other types of cancer. However, more recent studies that examine this effect of nitrosamines have found that it was greatly overhyped. In other words, it's not quite the cancer-causing substance that it's supposed to be. As a matter of fact, it's gone full circle where natural nitrate in foods, such as in vegetables and beet juice, is actually considered not only non-cancerous, but also highly beneficial to health, because nitrate is converted to nitrite in the body through enzymes and eventually converted to nitric oxide, which is very beneficial to health. It helps increase exercise endurance, helps prevent cardiovascular disease, and it also stimulates hormonal flow. Now, as far as the cancer effect, there is some truth to that. But what is the actual relationship between red meat and cancer? It has to do with overcooking meat. When you overcook meat, the fat dripping down, it causes, such as like grilling. It can create cancer-promoting compounds. Example of this is, for example, heterocyclic amines, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and advanced glycation end products. All of these negative factors are produced when meat is cooked excessively, like charcoal, burnt, well done. These chemicals could exist in meat, and they can actually cause DNA mutations and possibly promote cancer. So the bottom line is overcooked meat, charred meat, that stuff, that is bad for you. In fact, a couple of years ago, they came out with the German equivalent of the FDA came out with a study indicting creatine as a cause of cancer. Now, that was really strange, and I looked into that. I wrote an article about why it was BS. I even contacted some of the world's leading researchers on creatine. It turns out that when you overcook meat to the point of burning it, or where it's just charred, you convert the creatine into the meat into a carcinogen. But that does not occur. Here's the essential point. That doesn't occur unless you char and burn the meat to a crisp. Normally cooked meat, the creatine is not converted into a carcinogen. I submitted this article to a bodybuilding magazine, and they refused to publish it because of the very notion that creatine could possibly cause cancer. They were so afraid of losing their supplement advertisers that they refused to run an article that I researched for 2 months, which I still am pissed off about after all these years. That was sheer stupidity, because if they had actually read the article, they would have shown that I proved that creatine is never a carcinogen. In fact, there's a form of creatine that actually they use to help prevent cancer. But I'm getting off the subject. The way to minimize the production of these possible carcinogens in overcooked meat is to use gentler cooking methods, such as stewing, steaming, instead of grilling and frying. Minimize cooking at high heats. Don't expose your meat directly to a flame. Limit charred and smoked food. If your meat is burnt, cut away the charred pieces. If you must cook at high heat, flip your meat frequently to prevent it from burning. Soak your meat in a marinade, like one made from honey and herbs, before cooking. The marinating might actually decrease the formation of heterocyclic amines, which are the carcinogens. So I also want to mention that I myself, I cut out red meat about 3 or 4 years ago, because I came down with a disease called diverticulitis. Diverticuli are little outpouchings in the intestine, and when they get inflamed, it becomes diverticulitis. It causes tremendous pain, bloated. I had to be hospitalized. I had a little complication called peritonitis. I don't want to go into details. I've done it in previous videos. However, I had nothing to do in the hospital, so I read a lot of research papers on diverticulitis. I found out that red meat was a secondary risk factor, not a primary risk factor, but a secondary risk factor for the onset of diverticulitis. At the time, I was looking for a way to cut red meat out, not for health reasons, for ethical reasons, because I'm one of those people that I love animals. I had already cut out, years before, I'd cut out all pork products like bacon, because pigs are they're like dogs. Pigs are very, very intelligent, very sweet animal, and the thought of eating a pig was abhorrent to me. So I cut out bacon. I know a lot of people won't listen to this stuff, but that's just me. I cut out pork maybe 15, 20 years ago. I don't eat bacon. And after I got out of the hospital, I cut out red meat. I only eat chicken now, and I eat very small amounts of chicken. One of these days, I hope to cut out chicken completely, because, I've written about this in my Applied Metabolic newsletter, I know there's ways where you could be very healthy as a vegan. You get all the protein you need. None of there's nothing wrong with it. But I want to emphasize the reason why I would ever consider going vegan is only for the ethical reasons of not wanting to eat animals, not for any of these bogus health things about how bad red meat is. That's complete BS. I've done the research. As a matter of fact, in an upcoming article in my Applied Metabolics, I'm going to go into much greater detail about the controversies related to red meat, way above anything I could mention in this video, because if I tried to put in a video, the video would be about 8 hours long. So it's going to be an upcoming article for those of you interested in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, which is www.appliedmetabolics.com. I also want to mention that when I was a bodybuilding competitor, I lived on something what they call today what is it called? I can't remember the carnivore diet. The carnivore diet basically is top heavy in protein, especially animal protein foods. I kind of lived on a version of it when I was a bodybuilding competitor. My bodybuilding contest diet, which I got from a trainer named Vince Garanda, was meat and eggs, entirely meat. That's all I lived on, meat and eggs. Now, as I said earlier, I didn't want to take in a lot of fat, so I went to a butcher. I had them remove almost all the excess fat, and I only consumed lean cuts of meat like sirloin and ground round. And when I cooked the meat, it was so lean that there was like 1 drop of fat would come out of the meat when I cooked it. And when I did some research, I found it only had slightly more fat than eating fish. That's how lean the meat was. I got to tell you, I had no side effects whatsoever from eating meat. I lived on this diet for up to 9 months at a time. That's it, meat and eggs. I wouldn't do it today. There was problems with it that I didn't know back then, such as the lack of dietary fiber. I could have gotten in a lot of trouble. Why I didn't, I couldn't tell you. I did take vitamins. I did take certain supplements that probably had some fiber that probably prevented the problems. But my point is, I felt great on eating red meat, and I had no health problems whatsoever. And I'm not advocating anybody eating red meat. All I'm trying to say by telling this anecdote about myself is that I never had all these crazy health problems that these militant vegan advocates say. Cancer, cardiovascular disease, it's going to do this, it's going to do that, it's going to make your nose fall off, your penis is going to drop off, all this crap. It's just BS. If you want to be a vegan and live on vegetables because you love animals, more power to you. I believe in the same thing myself. My point is, don't believe all the crap they say about red meat. Most of it's related to processed meat. The bottom line, avoid processed meat. If you're one of those people that likes steaks and red meat and hamburgers, fine. But you can eat them. If you don't care about the ethical, that's your business. However, I really strongly urge, don't eat processed meat. Even though some studies have said processed meat is not as dangerous as portrayed, I still think, because it has been related to the onset of some types of cancer, some susceptible people who might have, let's say, greater genetic tendencies to cancer might put themselves at risk eating processed meat. Processed feet? No, that's for cannibals. That's another video. Processed meat. Don't eat processed meat. Eat only fresh meat. So that's about it for this. Again, I'm going to have a huge article on the true health effects and risks of eating red meat coming up in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. And that publication, I cover nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging research that's practical and you could use today. And I'll just quickly add that I've seen a lot of videos lately. This is just a little rant on my part. I've seen some videos, I have to laugh when I say that, where they basically, they're like clickbait. They'll say, stop aging now. In other words, you watch the video and they have these charlatans, these fraudsters, giving you information on how you could actually stop the aging process and even revert back to being younger. That's complete bogus bullshit, and it kind of pisses me off because everybody's afraid. Nobody really wants to die, but what you can do is increase health span, which is the number of years that you're healthy and free of degenerative diseases like cardiovascular disease, cancer, brain degeneration. That you can do with good nutrition and exercise. And this is what I talk about in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. I don't give anyone any false hopes. So that also I talk about effective fat loss techniques, what works and what really doesn't. That's another topic where there's a lot of bogus crap going on about losing body fat. I tell you the truth based on evidence-based science. I talk about ergogenic aids. I talk about hormonal therapy such as testosterone replacement therapy. I talk about steroids, not giving out steroid regimes, but talking about studies that come out showing the possible health effects of using steroids, and both the good and the bad. I give you the whole picture. I'm not taking any particular stand on using steroids. I just give you the truth and the facts, because I'm trying to help people from getting sick. Because there's been, as you guys know, there's been a lot of deaths recently among bodybuilders. A lot of them are indirectly related to high-dose steroid use. In my newsletter, I talk about ways where you could possibly avoid these complications. For example, I have an article coming up on how steroids affect renal or kidney health. A lot of the people have died recently have died of kidney complications related to drug use, steroid use. I talk about why this happens and how to prevent it. That's the type of stuff I cover in Applied. I cover women's health and fitness. I cover more topics in Applied Metabolics than any other digital publication. So subscribe today, www.appliedmetabolics.com. It's 30 to 50 pages every month, no ads. You notice under my videos, that's another thing I get a laugh out of. A lot of these experts, I notice that they're selling little doodads now. Some of these guys, they give these informational videos, and they're selling cups with their name on it and T-shirts. I don't know about you, but that creates a credibility gap. Why would somebody who's legitimately knowledgeable be selling cups and T-shirts of themselves? There's something wrong with that. You notice I'm not selling any cups and T-shirts. The only thing I'm selling or suggesting is my Applied Metabolics newsletter, because I genuinely think it'll help a lot of people. It's one of the only honest sources of information on the entire internet. I'm telling you, check it out. You'll see I'm telling you the honest truth. So again, subscribe today, www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on exercise, nutrition, general medicine. I also have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics webpage where current subscribers only can send me any short questions, something they might have read in the newsletter, or possibly anything that comes to mind. As long as they're short questions, I will answer those questions as a service, because I appreciate the subscription. And also, I don't accept unsolicited questions. If you're not a subscriber, I just don't have time to answer. You're welcome to leave comments under this video, such as possible suggestions for future videos. Also, you might want to subscribe to my channel, because I put out videos every week, usually on Tuesday, actually late Monday night, but it's Tuesday. It's actually Tuesday already. Every Tuesday I post a new video. So if you subscribe, you'll get a I guess they send you YouTube or something. They send you an email telling you that a new video has been posted. So subscribe. Tell others about my channel if they want to have truthful information. Again, there's no dancing girls. There's no fancy graphics. There's no, bikini women. I wish there was, actually, but don't have any. They're not dancing around in the background. But what I am giving you is 100% truth that you could count on. So thank you for listening. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog.